Morning team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War News Update for the 30th of September 2023, the first part thereof. The second part might well go onto my other channel. I'm still having, goodness me, I'm stressed out with this whole YouTube shenanigans thing and then being hit by copyright claims from dubious Indian sources. So yeah, things are a bit funky at the moment and I do apologise if that messes up my schedule for getting stuff out. Nonetheless, I will try my best. I've got one of my boys has a football match next, so I've got family things to attend to. Then I'll get my second news piece out. Right, let's go to where we normally start. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. 470 is an uptick from the last 3 or 4 days, so I think that might tell you something, that things are happening on the front line, particularly around Robotina. I'm starting to see an awful lot of footage of trench lines being completely taken out, of lots of pretty horrific footage, actually, of, given my bias and the skew of where I look, there's going to be a lot more Russian losses than Ukrainian losses, but there certainly are a lot of Russian losses. 4 tanks, 12 armoured personnel vehicles, it's a bit of an uptick there. 38 artillery systems is another huge day or huge loss in that category for today. Yesterday, just incredible artillery losses for the Russian armed forces over the last 3 months. 2 multiple launch rocket systems, 1 anti-aircraft warfare systems, so those keep ticking along and they will hurt the Russians because, you know, obviously anti-aircraft warfare systems, losing 1 a day, these are high value systems. Even if they are only your short range pieces of kit, they are going to allow Ukrainian airframes to get close to the front line to do what they need to do. 15 drones, that's not from last night, the night before. There was a drone attack last night. 18 vehicles and fuel tanks and 2 pieces of special equipment, so slightly lower on the vehicles and fuel tanks but still significant, and a lot of artillery again, with a number of APVs being lost too. Now if we go to the visual confirmation, don't know how long this is going to last from Oryx. They're wrapping things up, or he's wrapping things up, 1st of October, so it could be tomorrow. This could be one of his last ones. So these are these are Russian losses, and there's almost parity, slightly more Russian losses than Ukrainian. You'd expect there to be heavy Ukrainian losses given they are on these massive, or this one singular massive attack. That's a bit of music quote for those aficionados out there. Okay, so we have infantry fighting vehicles, only 1 tank, an unknown one, a number of pieces of artillery. Then we've got a Su-35, that one was shot down in Tokmak by friendly fire. Russians, that goes in a foot or in the bird up there or something, I don't know. Australia surface to air missile system, another short range one, and that might well be the one that we see on the list that we just gone through, but you don't know with Oryx with the date stamps for when these are lost. Now when we look at the Ukrainian losses, yep, slightly fewer losses, but 3 tanks there, so slightly heavier on the tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, MRAPs, and so on and so forth. YPR APC, so Bushmasters, a lot of the kind of vehicles you would expect to see given the style of maneuvers that the Ukrainians are doing at the moment. We're going to look at Andrew Perpetua, the mapper I rely on. He says, forget that that's highlighted, and also his Su-25 is a typo, it should be a Su-35. But nevertheless, we have a lot more Russian losses than Ukrainians. I actually think that Andrew Perpetua's list is a better snapshot of what happened in the last 24 hours. I just get the idea that he is compiling things more. He's probably spending more time, to be honest, looking at feeds. I know he does that an awful lot for his mapping. He's probably looking at more imagery than Oryx at the moment, given that Oryx is winding down. Anyway, as you can see here, quite a bit of artillery, quite a number of tanks, so that's different from what Oryx had, and we have some other sort of pieces of equipment spread across the normal categories. But yeah, recovery vehicle and surveillance and comms, this Muron M, which actually I've got footage of that, and the Su-35, sorry, there is now imagery of that on the ground. As far as the Ukrainian losses, these are all pickup trucks, vans. These are all civilian vehicles, so no military vehicles, as we saw with Oryx's Ukrainian losses there. So those losses might well be from the video footage that we've seen from the drone that has looked at the stuff around Verbove that's been lost over the last month or two. So I think that's what that is, rather than anything that's happened in the last 24 hours. When it comes to the last 24 hours, there's not as much Ukrainian stuff that's been lost, or at least we don't have evidence of it yet. That's how I'd interpret the data. Okay, now this is one of the most significant things I've read in the last few weeks, really, because it confirms certainly what I've been talking about, what a lot of us have been saying, and it concerns barrels and artillery. And when you go and look at these figures on a daily basis, and you're seeing 38 artillery systems, again, surely this is hurting the Russians. When is this going to start really properly being seen to hurt the Russians? Well, actually, the Russians are complaining about this every single day. They're complaining in certain places like Kherson and Zaporizhia that they do not have counter-battery fire. So that kind of tipping point has been breached, right? I would argue, and we are seeing that evidence. Well, here's another piece of evidence coming from a Russian source. So Russians use their artillery sparingly due to shortage of barrels. Exactly what I was talking. So remember, I showed you some satellite imagery showing storage facilities of Russian Jetsins to which variant? One of the variants of Jiatsin showing that over the last year the storage has been pillaged and there are only like 4 left with barrels on. And that's only one type of self-propelled gun, so there are other variants of that have more barrels, but this is significant. So the Russian source says, as artillery officers from the headquarters of the Northern Military District told us, now the artillery barrel production resource is about 80%, and this explains the low artillery support of our defending units. I don't understand what that means, whether it's down 80%, so it's operating at 20%. They save the resource of barrels to deter the enemy in the event of a big breakthrough. Right, so they're not using barrels get worn down. The rifling on them goes, then they can blow up without adequate maintenance. They can burst. So now barrels are not arriving since the technology for their mass production is almost lost. I mean, wow, that's a massive claim. So they're just not making them. I don't know what the production resource about 80% means, but they're saying basically then saying that they're not really making them. Now they're removing barrels from equipment that is located at storage bases that have a service level of at least 50%. So going back to the satellite imagery of those Jetsins that are having their barrels removed, even when they remove those and put them on guns whose barrels have been burst, it looks something like that usually when they burst. So you get a barrel and you put it on from an older gun, but then that older gun, of course, has been sitting in storage for 50 years, and or however long, and itself had been used previously and probably not maintained particularly well. So that new barrel still only has like less than 50% of its service life. So, of course, we will fulfill our tasks, but where is the role and place of Shoigu Gerasimov in forecasting this issue before the start of the SVO, the Special Military Operation? And of course, no one forecasted this because this was supposed to be over in 3 days. This wasn't an artillery battle. This wasn't an artillery war. This wasn't a war. When, honestly, like I've said 100 times to you, when they planned this, they planned it as a special military operation because they were deposing the Ukrainian government within 3 days, 15 days to clear up, and then they're back out of. They do a parade because they've got the parade uniforms. They've only got meals for rations for 5 days. That's all they went into Ukraine with: rations for 5 days, parade uniforms in their vehicles, plans that showed that this was going to be the intention, and the idea that they were only planned for, in strategically for a deposing of the government over a 3 to 15 day period. A year and a half later, they're in a war that they hadn't planned for. So why didn't Shoigu Gerasimov forecast this issue? Because this issue wasn't even on radar. There was no chance of this going on for a year and a half. Except that's exactly what happened, because garbage in, garbage out, they had poor intel and they made absolutely shocking decisions. Now, because of this miscalculation, the guys are paying with their lives, and the troops have switched from offensive to defensive. That is a massively significant interception that I think goes to an awful lot of what we've been talking about. Okay, talking about Muron M. This is a Muron M surveillance system. These things pop up quite a lot, and when we see special equipment, numbers of this being destroyed on a daily basis. This is often the sort of stuff it is. You can see it sort of surveilling and doing what it does, and then that gets taken out by a loitering munition. We have just an idea of what some of these bits of kit look like. You see numbers on here, and you automatically think, well, you might think that, oh, these are big pieces of equipment, on wheels, tracks, or whatever. No, some of these are just small bits of equipment tacked onto the side of buildings, up mobile phone masts, up electricity pylons, on rooftops. And they put them everywhere, and it's as you can see here, quite difficult to spot. Green within green, but when they are spotted, they are taken out because these allow the Russians to do their ISR, intelligence surveillance reconnaissance. Okay, Lieutenant Colonel Irek Magasumov, hero of Russia, who was personally decorated by Putin in early August, has been detained in Luhansk, Ukraine, on suspicion of murdering an 18-year-old girl in a bar, being in a state of alcoholic intoxication. I just include that. That's another loss of a fairly important officer by the looks of it. So, yeah. They can ill afford to lose those, and they can probably ill afford to lose not so much the airframe, but the trained pilots in situations like this. So this is a crash site of the Su-35 that was shot down near Tokmak. Was it 2 nights ago now? Which was apparently shot down by Russian air defense forces. I mean, that's caught on film, and this happened. 100% happened. So that is. Yeah, it's a bit of a costly mistake for the Russians. Now, last night, going on to strikes, there was a wave of drone attacks over Odessa, Mykolaiv, and Vinnytsia regions. 30 out of 40 were shot down. You might think that's pretty good. That's a 75% interception rate, which is certainly an improvement on the beginning of the war, or the beginning when they were starting to use these munitions. However, still 10 getting through. And that's still 10 potentially hitting their targets. It doesn't necessarily mean that those 10 hit what they're supposed to hit, or what they're supposed to hit were decent military targets, so on and so forth. So there's loads of caveats, but 10 drones getting through is still significant, and that you would want. Obviously, you're going to want 100% interception rate. Probably unrealistic, but 10 getting through still causes trouble, and 30 falling to the ground as balls of fire, or with their explosives intact and exploding wherever they fall, is a challenge, right? And that needs to be dealt with. So yeah, this is, it's not ideal, but they are shooting down most of them, so I guess that is good. Right, Bryansk region was hit last night again. I said 2 nights ago an electricity substation was hit. Pohar, Bryansk region, the Russian Federation, minus a power plant. I don't know if this is a power plant, a substation more like, in Bryansk. So that's the second night. I think this is a different incident. This was coming out last night. So I think you've got this means that there's something of a concerted effort to take out energy infrastructure within some of the oblasts that are next to Ukraine. It's a kind of like, well, you've done this to us, we're going to do it to you. It doesn't look like it's at all in the same kind of category of what Russia did to Ukraine over the last autumn and winter. However, they can cause Russia problems. Russia's a massive country, and I've said this before, part of the issue for Ukraine has been covering an entire nation of Ukraine with enough air defenses to protect power stations, substations, airfield, air bases, critical infrastructure in Kiev, so on and so forth, and now grain infrastructure and storage and export. Well, the Russians have a much bigger country. And actually, if Ukraine can just throw these drones out, they don't have to even be whole waves of drones, just a drone there, drone there, drone there. Then the Russians have to move their air defense equipment to protect these areas, and they don't have enough for such a massive country, whilst also prosecuting a war and needing those air defense systems near their front lines, for military purposes. So it's it's an issue for Ukraine, but it's an even bigger issue potentially for Russia. And if Ukraine can get significant waves of or numbers of loitering munitions and drones and throw them into Russia, as they are doing, but you step that up by an order of magnitude, then Russia are going to be in potentially in a lot of trouble. Right, let's move on. As you can see, not too much to report in terms of strikes. I don't know whether I've just missed a lot or whether it's somewhat of a quieter day yesterday. We're going to go on to other bits and pieces here. We have, instead of 1,000 words here, we have a Ukrainian Azovstal defender who is up in court in Russia. So these are the key people that Russia want to sort of grandstand their arrest and prosecution, because they see these as the worst of the Ukrainians, right? That's the POW before and after being captured by the Russian army. All Russian war criminals must be prosecuted, says Visegrad 24. It's not the first time we've seen Ukrainian POWs kept in pretty poor conditions. Right, Anton Gerashchenko says, a concert is taking place on Moscow's Red Square to mark the anniversary of the annexation of Ukrainian territories. It's called One Country, One Family, One Russia. The concert is not broadcast on federal channels or online, unlike the one a year ago. Putin won't attend, so that's interesting in itself. Like, they are doing this on Red Square, but they're not throwing it around everywhere. Why is that? I don't know. I don't have the answer. But last time they did this, so previously Russian telegram channels reported that people were recruited for money to attend the concert. So a year ago, they had that massive rally that was basically this, but they broadcast it everywhere, and they paid an awful lot of people, by the looks of it, or forced an awful lot of people to turn up with their brand new flags and do all this kind of stuff. Very much a PR stunt. It's not organic. It's not particularly. I mean, there will be probably a lot of pro-Russian feeling there and sentiment, but there'll be a lot of people who I'm sure are there because they're expected to be there. Okay. Lastly, a rescue mission behind enemy lines. There's quite a bit of talk about this on the socials at the moment. I don't really know the details, but this is what P-Star 11 says. 2 Ukrainian paratroopers hid for a year and a half in Russian-controlled territory. Quote, every life is important. The Navy and the GUR conducted a successful special operation and returned home 2 Ukrainian paratroopers. A few weeks ago, the Navy Intelligence Department received information from operational sources that 2 servicemen in the Ukrainian Armed Forces have been in the temporarily occupied territory since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. There, where they participated in battles with the occupiers, were seriously injured and were unable to independently enter the territory controlled by Ukraine. All this time they were in an illegal situation, successfully hid thanks to local residents. An evacuation plan was prepared, the implementation of which also involved the command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine Armed Forces, whose units provided fire cover during the exit of the group. Thanks to the joint efforts of 2 servicemen who have been in the occupied territory for more than a year and a half, it was possible to bring them to the territory controlled by Ukraine the other day. So this is the sort of stuff that Hollywood films are going to be made of. I was listening to Ukraine the Latest a few weeks back, and they had a guy, John, he's an urban warfare specialist, and he's been over in Ukraine sort of helping training and stuff, and he said he has spoken to this Ukrainian guy that he's like, I can't believe the global media don't know about this guy. It's just insane. So he was in Mariupol and spent something like 9 months drinking puddle water, ditch water or whatever, and eating rats or whatever it was, and surviving. And then a girl with a mobile phone found him, and this incredible story, just an insane story of how he eventually escaped as well. And about survival and about the psychology of what happens with these sort of people in your head, and who do you trust and who do you not trust. And yeah, just incredible. I might have to dig that out from the Ukrainian Latest and play that as part of an extra. It was pretty insane. But anyway, that is that for today. Just a few bits and pieces, and to let you know again, I'll be putting part 2 probably on my Atypical Philosopher channel as a way to try and combat the issues I am having. Thank you so much for your support. I am just incredibly grateful. You are superb. I'm also hoping to do a live stream with Operator Starsky tomorrow night. Please keep your eyes peeled for that, although he's quite difficult to get hold of, and I just want to make sure he's fine with all the times and everything, and it can sometimes go like a week or two before I hear from him. So hopefully that'll go ahead. If it doesn't, it'll just be me, and I'll probably get hold of Matt or something, and we can have a chat about whatever. Anyway, thank you, take care, speak soon.